Hello, this is Michael Paul with New Orleans Scottish Rite College. I'd like to talk today about the phrase separation of church and state. This phrase is often used when discussing political and religious practices in the United States government, but it can also apply to aspects of Masonic tradition and philosophy. But what does this phrase mean? I believe that we should examine the history of the phrase, along with how we sometimes understand its meaning and origin. I'd also like to look at problems that have developed over the years from debated interpretations of this phrase. Such a study can contribute to a better appreciation of how and why Masons use the philosophy of this phrase in our teachings and practices. To begin with, prior to the American Revolution, religion for those living in the 13 colonies was dictated by the laws of England. England, like most European countries, had a state religion, and the citizens were required by law to profess whatever religion was approved by the government. Those who professed other religions could be fined, imprisoned, or even in some cases put to death for the crime of having a religious faith different from what the government allowed. Now, the people living in the American colonies were considered citizens of England and were bound to its laws. As time passed, they became increasingly upset at being told what they could and could not believe. A question that quickly comes to mind about laws attempting to dictate religious beliefs is, how do you actually control what someone else believes? Well, you can't. No one can read someone else's mind. You can, by law and punishment, control what people tell you that they believe, but you can't make a law requiring that all of the citizens switch to a religion of your choice and also expect that others will change how they believe in their hearts. All that you can reasonably expect is that the people will tell you one thing, but likely continue to believe whatever they want. When you think about it, this type of law existing anywhere is the perfect recipe for a very disgruntled population. Religious freedom was not the only demand of the early American colonists, but it was an important one. The people wanted the freedom to openly believe and belong to whatever religion they chose. They did not want the government to tell them to which religion they must belong or how and what they should believe. That was too personal of a decision for anyone but the individual to make. But a great mistake is to believe that the colonists wanted a government void of all mention of religion or the moral teachings of religion. The belief in God is written into all aspects of the Constitution and early documents of the young United States government. But what about this separation of church and state? Wasn't that in the Declaration of Independence or Constitution? No, it was not. The seeds for the concept of separation of church and state can be traced to an 1802 letter written by President Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist Association in Connecticut. This letter became read by many when it was published in a Massachusetts newspaper. The Danbury Baptist Association were a group of Baptists who were concerned because they were a minority religion, and they feared that the government would take control of them and force them to change their nature to better match those of the majority faiths. President Jefferson wrote, "Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state." Now, a problem with words is that their meaning may not always be completely clear. This is why we should try to understand the environment in which words were written or spoken. In this case, Jefferson wrote this not too many years after the creation of the United States, which fought a war in part to attain religious freedoms. Jefferson is saying that the United States was not in the business of creating a state religion, and that all of its citizens were free to worship as they felt best. The government was not going to tell anyone how they should worship. This was the personal choice of each individual. This is the same view that Freemasonry has of religion. To start with, Freemasonry is not itself a religion. It has no desire to tell anyone how to worship, provide its members with any path for salvation, or tell anyone that this faith is better than another faith. That is a private matter between each Mason and God, by whatever name the Mason uses to define the Supreme Being. Masonry does not involve itself in the particulars of a member's religious faith. All that we say is that we should recognize that there is something greater than us, and we should worship however our heart dictates. We teach our members about living as best as we can during our lifetime, and that each member should look to his own religion for matters concerning the afterlife. The problem sometimes comes when someone says A, B, and C, and then someone else, many years later, comes along and asks what was meant by A, B, and C. If the one who originally said it is no longer alive, then all that we can do is to try and give an answer using our best reasoning as to the meaning. We may be right, or we could be a little to a good bit off. There is also the matter of free will. Just because we say that the government will not favor one religion over another, can we point to any aspects of the government that may have favored one faith over another? Let's look at an example. Let's use a third-grade public school teacher. Let's say that she is a woman of deep religious faith. She truly and deeply believes the teachings of her faith. She also has the opportunity to educate and mold a whole classroom of young minds. She cares about these children. She starts teaching the qualities of her own religious faith, and even at times represents it as the one true faith. This is what she believes, and she certainly does not believe that she is doing anything but helping the children. This teacher is placing her own faith above the faith of others. She's not a politician. She's a teacher in a public school, but she does represent an aspect of government. She is a figure of authority who uses that position to advance her own religious faith above others, and does so to children with impressionable minds. She may well believe that she is doing what is best for the children under her care. She has, however, compromised the balance that was intended to exist between providing a basic, non-specific foundation of religion and advancing one's own faith over another. Anyone who has read anything about Thomas Jefferson knows that this is exactly the opposite of what he meant. This is just an example, but it is what began happening in many public schools by many teachers throughout the 1800s and into the 1900s. Balance is a tricky thing. If you represent balance with a pendulum, then you can see that if you pull the little ball out of the center balance position and then let it swing back, it swings first out of balance in the other direction. It will then swing back and forth in both directions before eventually finding the center balance position. You pulled it out of balance in one direction, but when you tried to correct it, it swung out of balance in the other direction. This will happen every time. There is a message here. The Founding Fathers knew exactly what they meant in regard to the policies that they created, but over time, they died, and questions would come up that needed answers. One question that repeatedly seemed to come up concerned this concept of separation between the church and state. Did this separation mean that all forms of government were to be void of any aspect of religion? Well, that answer was always a quick no. Most all early U.S. documents reference God. Prayer was in all branches of government. It is very clear that a general foundation of religion was in all aspects of government. The particulars of religious faith, however, were left up to the individuals. Unfortunately, and maybe most notably in the area of public schools, this led to abuse and the pulling of the pendulum out of balance. School teachers were entrusted with the education of young minds. It is a great responsibility and requires dedication and care on the part of the educators. There was a balance, a tightrope, which needed to be walked. On one hand, prayer with basic religion and morality were taught to all students. The idea was to give a religious or moral foundation, which could then be built upon by the students with the house of worship of their choice, teaching the individual religious lessons. Of course, It was also perfectly acceptable if one chose to have no religion at all in his life. The government was not going to tell others how to believe or if they should have any religious beliefs at all. The schools simply laid out the basic path from which the individuals could travel wherever they chose. On the other hand, was the religious beliefs of the teachers. As long as the teachers did not take that extra step into the area of specific religious teachings, it was felt that all would be well. Teachers were expected to shelve their own personal beliefs and not step over the line into advancing their own religious convictions to the young minds of the students. Regrettably, the failure of teachers who felt the uncontrollable need to advance their own personal beliefs in schools became common. It was not just Christianity that was advanced, but specific and many times different branches of Christianity that were taught to students. Parents were not happy when they could see that their children's being influenced into religious teachings that they felt should be taught in houses of worship, not public schools. In 1947, a case known as Everson versus Board of Education went to the Supreme Court. In his majority opinion, Justice Hugo Black wrote, "In the words of Thomas Jefferson, the clause against establishment of religion by law was intended to erect a wall of separation between church and state." Notice the words "was intended." Justice Black was interpreting the meaning of Jefferson's words. This interpretation of what Justice Black believed Jefferson meant helped lay the foundation for the near removal of all mention and aspects of religion from not only public schools, but many to most branches of government. The wall of separation became understood to mean religion over here and government over here. The two could not mix. Because of past abuses and attempts to influence individuals, mainly children, in regard to religious beliefs, the attempt at correcting the abuses resulted in the pendulum effect, the pulling the ball out of balance by the influencing of children in matters of religion resulted in the attempt to correct the situation by the Supreme Court. The ball of balance was released from its out of balance position, but instead of returning to its center position of balance, it went out of balance in the opposite direction. Instead of a situation where the government would not attempt to dictate or influence its citizens in regard to religion, they moved to a position where religion would be purged from most all aspects of government. But what of Freemasonry? Well, the position of Freemasonry is very clear in its many written and verbal teachings. Freemasonry is a particular system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. Freemasonry is not a religion. It does not influence its members to accept any religious beliefs over others. A belief in a supreme being is required in all regular lodges in the United States, but we do not dictate particular religious beliefs. But just as all aspects of Freemasonry mirror society, so does this situation. Little by little, religious abuses have been taking place. There have been cases, and it is growing, where membership into Freemasonry has been influenced by the religion of the candidate. If one is a member of the wrong religion, then they don't get in. Lack of proper Masonic education has resulted in more than a few starting to believe that membership into Freemasonry is limited or should be limited to Christians. In addition, some view the word Christian as only applying to specific branches of Christianity. Ignorance of Freemasonry is putting us on a most dangerous path. I believe that it is far too late to put out a cry to better guard the West Gate. Far too many with but limited actual understanding of the teachings of Freemasonry have entered all levels of leadership in Grand Lodges, the York Rite, and the Scottish Rite. To deny this does not help us. Like a swinging pendulum, the laws of nature must be obeyed. When we go too far out of balance in one direction, then we end up swinging back too far the other way. Time is the only remedy. Patience and wisdom are the only salves that we can apply to weather the challenging times that may lay ahead. The good news is that we can see young Masons all over working hard to advance Masonic education through educational gatherings, teaching events, and publications. This kind of education must continue. It's not a quick fix, but it is a sound one. We must support others when we see them trying to do the real work of Freemasonry. Yes, where Masonic knowledge should exist, ego still controls too many in leadership. Be patient with them. Help them where you can. Walk rather than battle. Old guys like me who are punished for daring to challenge the system are generally becoming a thing of the past. We must not stop learning and passing on what we have learned. Be assured that it will take time, but it is the work that must be done. The phrase separation of church and state has different meanings to different people. It's not the intent of this video to provide political opinions as to actions taken by any branch of government. Looking at the world through the lens of Freemasonry is the goal. Freemasonry does not favor any particular religion over another. We judge the moral worth of the individual, period. Likewise, individual Masons should not judge others seeking to join, or those already in Masonry, by their religious faith. During our history, we have had many highly respected and influential Masons of nearly every imaginable religious faith. Each was judged by their Masonic work, not by their religious faith. We need to pay attention to ourselves and our own growth in Masonry as well as humanity. We need to work towards balance in all aspects of our life. We need to recognize when things are out of balance and not expect unreasonably quick corrections. We need to have patience, be dedicated, and allow wisdom to guide our thoughts and actions. We need to govern ourselves accordingly. Thank you for watching. If you like the videos, please hit the like button and subscribe to us. See you next time.